So you want a trench? Bob asked, scratching his head. A big one? Bigger, I replied. Think medieval, think defensive. Bob's grin widened. I like your style, he chuckled. When do we start? The tranquility of my backyard, usually a sanctuary of shimmering turquoise, and the happy shrieks of children splashing in the pool, was shattered by a single, brightly colored flyer. It was taped to my mailbox, a jarring splash of orange against the serene backdrop of my carefully curated flower beds. Attention residents, it proclaimed in bold, blocky letters. New HOA regulation, prohibition of swimming pools. I snatched the flyer, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. Swimming pools? Banned? It seemed preposterous. My pool, a sparkling oasis of chlorinated bliss, had been a fixture in my backyard for years. It was more than just a pool. It was the heart of my summer barbecues, the site of countless neighborhood pool parties, the source of endless joy for my family. It was my pool, a perfectly maintained, aesthetically pleasing, if I did say so myself, addition to my property. I scanned the flyer, my confusion growing with each line of bureaucratic jargon. The HOA, under the newly appointed leadership of one Karen McDictator, yes, that Karen, had decided that swimming pools, both above ground and in ground, were unsightly and disruptive to neighborhood harmony. They were, the flyer declared, incompatible with the desired aesthetic of our community. I scoffed. Neighborhood harmony? My pool had created neighborhood harmony. It was a gathering place, a source of fun and relaxation for everyone. What was disruptive about that? The fine print, however, was even more infuriating. The new regulation wasn't just about preventing new pool installations. It specifically targeted existing pools. Homeowners were ordered to remove their pools within 30 days or face hefty daily fines. Failure to comply, the flyer warned ominously, will result in further legal action. I reread the flyer, my anger simmering. This was outrageous. My perfectly maintained pool, which had been there for years, was now deemed unsightly and disruptive by a power-hungry HOA president with a clear vendetta against anything that didn't conform to her vision of suburban perfection. It was a blatant power grab, an arbitrary rule designed to exert control over homeowners and enforce Karen's narrow-minded aesthetic preferences. And it was, I knew, a direct attack on me. My pool, my pride and joy, had become a target in Karen's war on fun. Staring at the bright orange flyer, the unreasonable pool ban burning in my brain, a slow smile spread across my face. Karen McDictator wanted my pool gone? Fine. She wanted neighborhood harmony? Even better. I'd give her neighborhood harmony she wouldn't soon forget. If I couldn't have a pool? Well, I'd just have to think bigger. Much, much bigger. The idea, ridiculous and glorious in its pettiness, sparked in my mind like a rogue firework. A moat. A massive, magnificent moat, encircling my entire property. It was perfect. It was petty. It was exactly the kind of over-the-top response Karen deserved. The next morning, armed with a hefty dose of caffeine and a devilish grin, I set about making my vision a reality. First, the construction crew. I found a local company, Bob's Dig-em-Out, known for their discretion and their willingness to tackle unusual projects. I met with Bob himself, a burly man with a perpetually amused expression. So you want a trench? Bob asked, scratching his head. A big one? Bigger, I replied. Think medieval. Think defensive. Bob's grin widened. I like your style, he chuckled. When do we start? The digging began the following week. The massive excavator rumbled onto my property, its bucket scooping out vast quantities of earth. My neighbors watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Even Karen, who occasionally drove by in her pristine white SUV, seemed perplexed. What's he doing now? I overheard her mutter to a passenger, presumably another HOA busybody. Some kind of landscaping project? Looks like he's going for a Zen garden, the passenger replied with a hint of sarcasm. A very large Zen garden, Karen sniffed. I just smiled and waved, letting them believe it was just an eccentric landscaping project. Let them think I was simply rearranging the dirt. They had no idea what was coming. The trench grew wider and deeper, encircling my house like a protective embrace. It was truly a sight to behold, a gaping chasm in the earth that hinted at the glorious pettiness to come. And then, the water. I hired a water truck to fill the trench, transforming it from a ditch into a shimmering, reflective moat. The HOA, upon realizing my true intentions, collectively lost their minds. "A moat?" Karen shrieked, her voice echoing across the newly formed body of water. "You've built a moat! This is preposterous! This is unsightly!" "Unsightly?" I echoed, feigning confusion. "I think it's quite harmonious. Don't you agree? It really ties the whole yard together." Karen sputtered, her face turning an alarming shade of purple. "This is a clear violation of something. We'll find a rule. We'll find a dozen rules." "Good luck with that, Karen," I said, a mischievous glint in my eye. "Because as far as I'm concerned, this is just a very large, very decorative, natural water feature." The moat wasn't just a giant ditch filled with water. It was a carefully curated ecosystem of pettiness. I stocked it with a variety of fish, koi, goldfish, even a few brightly colored guppies, creating a vibrant underwater world. Lily pads, both real and strategically placed floating replicas, dotted the surface, adding a touch of serene beauty and further infuriating Karen. And, of course, no moat would be complete without a drawbridge. A ridiculously oversized, ornate drawbridge, complete with a crank and a dramatic creaking sound when lowered. It was completely unnecessary, utterly absurd, and absolutely perfect. The sheer scale of the moat was breathtaking. It wasn't just a small ditch. It was a veritable lake, encircling my house like a medieval fortress. It was so big, I considered getting a small boat. The absurdity of it all was precisely the point. It was a visual representation of Karen's over-the-top rules, magnified and amplified to an almost comical degree. Karen and the HOA, predictably, were apoplectic. They descended upon my property like a swarm of angry bees, their faces contorted with rage. "This is insane!" Karen shrieked, pointing at the moat with a trembling finger. "You can't just build a moat. It's a safety hazard. It's not in the community spirit." "Safety hazard?" I echoed, feigning concern. "Nonsense, Karen. It's perfectly safe. See?" I gestured towards a sign I erected near the drawbridge. "Caution, deep water. Do not feed the fish." "Fish?" Karen sputtered. "There are fish in there. What about alligators?" "Alligators?" I raised an eyebrow. "Karen, you wound me. I would never introduce such disruptive creatures into our harmonious community. Not yet, anyway." But, the moat!" Karen stammered. "It's against the rules. We'll find a rule. We'll cite every single bylaw if we have to." "Good luck with that, Karen," I said, pulling out a thick folder filled with meticulously compiled documents. "Because as far as I'm concerned, this is just a very large, very decorative, natural water feature." I proceeded to explain in excruciating detail how the moat technically complied with every single HOA landscaping rule. I cited obscure bylaws about natural water features, water retention, and erosion control. I even presented a report from a certified wetland specialist, a friend of mine with a knack for creative interpretations, who had declared the moat a vital part of the local ecosystem. Karen and the HOA board members stared at the documents, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. They were trapped. They couldn't argue with the paperwork. They couldn't deny the natural water feature designation, and they certainly couldn't accuse me of violating any specific rules. I had outpettied them. And to add insult to injury, I hired a team of landscapers to build decorative stone walls around the moat. They weren't just any stone walls. They were aesthetically pleasing. perfectly aligned and ridiculously expensive looking. Community aesthetics, I muttered to myself with a satisfied grin. It was the perfect finishing touch, a final flourish of pettiness that drove Karen absolutely bonkers.
It's beautiful, she shrieked, her voice laced with frustration. It's too beautiful. It's mocking us.
Mocking you? I feigned innocence. Karen, I'm just trying to enhance the neighborhood's harmony. Don't you agree? It really ties the whole yard together. The HOA's reaction to the moat was, to put it mildly, volcanic. Their outrage reverberated through the neighborhood, reaching a fever pitch at their emergency meeting. I could practically feel the steam rising from their pristine, rule-laden headquarters. They convened like a council of war, plotting their next move against my aquatic masterpiece. I imagined Karen, red-faced and sputtering, banging her gavel and demanding my immediate moat removal. But their frantic attempts to find a loophole, a bylaw, anything that could force me to drain my glorious creation, were met with the cold, hard reality of my meticulous planning. My natural water feature was airtight. They were trapped in their own bureaucratic web, tangled in the very rules they so gleefully wielded against others. Their powerlessness was delicious. But I wasn't content with merely outsmarting them. I wanted to escalate the pettiness to truly legendary levels. Enter the Caution Live Alligators signs. I strategically placed these ominous warnings around the moat, complete with cartoonish alligator illustrations and bold red lettering. The signs, of course, were entirely fabricated. At this point, the moat was populated only by harmless koi, guppies, and the occasional lily-pad-nibbling goldfish. But the HOA, particularly Karen, was already primed for paranoia. The mere suggestion of alligators sent them into a full-blown panic.
Alligators!
I overheard Karen shriek to a fellow HOA member during her usual drive-by surveillance of my property.
He's put alligators in the moat? That's it. This has gone too far. But are there actually alligators?
The other HOA member asked nervously.
Of course there are alligators!
Karen huffed.
He's trying to intimidate us. He thinks she's so clever.
Karen, driven by her suspicion and a burning desire to catch me in the act of, well, having alligators, decided to take matters into her own hands. She arrived at my property, clad in her usual power suit, which seemed a bit overdressed for moat inspection, but who was I to judge, determined to inspect the moat herself. I watched from my window, a mug of hot chocolate in hand, because what's a bit of petty revenge without a cozy beverage? As Karen cautiously approached the drawbridge. She peered over the edge, her nose practically touching the water, searching for any sign of reptilian menace. "There's nothing there," she muttered to herself, her voice laced with disappointment. "He's bluffing." Just as she straightened up, convinced that her alligator fears were unfounded, the drawbridge, which I may or may not have subtly loosened earlier, gave way with a dramatic creak. Karen, caught off guard, yelped and tumbled headfirst into the moat. The splash was magnificent. I choked back a laugh as I watched her emerge, sputtering and dripping, her power suit now thoroughly soaked. The koi, startled by the sudden intrusion, scattered in all directions. Karen, covered in lily pads and fish slime, looked less like a fearsome HOA president and more like a swamp monster. The security camera, of course, captured the entire spectacle in glorious high definition. It was a moment destined for viral infamy. I couldn't have scripted it better myself. Karen's unexpected swim in the moat was the comedic climax, but the real masterpiece of petty revenge was yet to come. The "Caution Live Alligator" signs, initially a bluff, now required, well, alligators. I wasn't about to populate my moat with wild man-eating reptiles. That would be irresponsible, and frankly, a bit much even for me. Instead, I opted for a more civilized approach. I contacted a licensed wildlife facility, specializing in rescued and rehabilitated animals. After a surprisingly easy application process, apparently moat owner is a perfectly valid reason to adopt alligators, I became the proud guardian of 3 small, docile alligators. They were about the size of large house cats, more interested in sunbathing and eating fish than causing any actual trouble. They were also, importantly, legally, my alligators, with all the necessary permits and documentation to prove it. The HOA naturally lost what little composure they had left when they discovered the actual alligators in my moat. Their paranoia, initially fueled by my signs, had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. They descended upon my property once again, this time with a contingent of police officers in tow. "He's done it!" Karen shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the alligators, who were peacefully basking on a floating log. "He's actually put alligators in the moat! This is a public safety hazard! Arrest him!" The police officers, looking even more bewildered than before, approached me cautiously. "Mr. Jamie," the older officer said, his voice laced with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. "We received a complaint about alligators." "Yes, officer," I replied calmly. "My alligators. Would you like to see their adoption papers?" I produced the aforementioned documentation, complete with photos of my reptilian companions and official stamps from the wildlife facility. The officers examined the paperwork, their expressions shifting from concern to incredulity. "These alligators are legally yours?" the younger officer asked, clearly struggling to wrap his head around the situation. "Indeed," I replied. "They're fully licensed and permitted, and as you can see," I gestured towards the moat, "they reside in a legally designated natural water feature. It's all perfectly above board." Karen sputtered, her face turning an alarming shade of red. But alligators, in a residential neighborhood, it's insane!" The older officer sighed. "Ma'am, I understand your concern. But Mr. Jamie has all the necessary permits, and as long as the alligators are contained within the moat, there's no legal basis for us to remove them." He turned to me, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Just try to keep them fed, Mr. Jamie," he said. "We don't want any incidents." "Of course, officer," I replied with a perfectly straight face. "They're quite fond of fish." The police officers, shaking their heads in disbelief, retreated back to their patrol cars. Karen and the remaining HOA members were left standing by the moat, their faces a mixture of anger, frustration, and utter bewilderment. They had been outsmarted, outpettied, and outmaneuvered at every turn. Their power, their authority, their carefully constructed world of suburban control had been completely and utterly dismantled by a moat, some fish, and a few legally adopted alligators. The absurdity of the situation was almost too much to bear, and I, standing on my drawbridge, overlooking my moat and my reptilian companions, couldn't help but smile. The HOA was trapped. Their carefully constructed web of rules and regulations, designed to exert control over every aspect of suburban life, had become their own undoing. They couldn't find me for the pool. It was gone, a casualty of their own petty ban. They couldn't find me for the moat. It was a natural water feature, a legally designated part of my landscaping. And they certainly couldn't find me for the alligators. They were legally adopted, permitted, and residing in their legally designated natural water feature. They had painted themselves into a corner, outsmarted and outmaneuvered at every turn. Their power, once so absolute, had evaporated, leaving them sputtering in the face of my magnificent moat. The community, on the other hand, embraced the moat with open arms. It wasn't just a moat. It was an attraction, a conversation starter, a symbol of rebellion against the HOA's overreach. Children squealed with delight as they watched the alligators bask in the sun, their small reptilian forms adding an exotic touch to the suburban landscape. Neighbors gathered on my drawbridge, sharing stories, laughing, and enjoying the spectacle. My house, once just another cookie-cutter dwelling in the neighborhood, had become the coolest house on the block, a source of pride, and a constant source of irritation for the HOA. And then there was the moat party. It was an epic affair, a celebration of my victory over the HOA and a community gathering of epic proportions. I strung lights around the moat, set up a sound system blasting upbeat music, and catered the event with enough food and drinks to feed an army. Everyone was invited, except, of course, the HOA board. They watched from their office windows, their faces a mixture of envy and resentment, as the sounds of laughter and celebration echoed through the neighborhood. The Moat Party was more than just a party. It was a symbol of my triumph. It was a public declaration that I had won, that I had turned their petty rules into a joke, and that I had reclaimed my right to a little bit of fun in my own backyard. It was also a way to thank my neighbors for their support, for their shared disdain for the HOA's tyranny, and for their willingness to embrace the absurdity of it all. The moat, once a symbol of conflict, had become a symbol of community, a gathering place where everyone was welcome, except, of course, the HOA board. They were isolated, ostracized, and utterly defeated. Their power had been stripped away, leaving them marooned on their island of rules and regulations, while the rest of the neighborhood celebrated in the moat-lit glow of my victory. The final nail in Karen's coffin was, ironically, delivered by her own clumsiness. The security camera footage of her moat mishap, her dramatic tumble into the lily pads and subsequent emergence covered in fish slime, had gone viral. It was everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even TikTok was flooded with memes featuring Karen as the moat monster, the lily pad princess, and the queen of the swamp. The image of her sputtering and dripping, her power suit ruined, her dignity shattered, was simply too good to resist. The humiliation was complete. Karen, once the feared and respected, or at least obeyed, HOA president, had become a laughingstock, a symbol of overbearing authority brought down by her own pettiness. She couldn't show her face in the neighborhood without being met with snickers and whispers. The HOA meetings became a source of amusement, with residents openly mocking her and quoting her most ridiculous pronouncements. The pressure was too much. Karen, already reeling from the public ridicule and the HOA's complete and utter defeat, finally resigned. Her resignation letter, a terse and bitter document, blamed personal reasons and community negativity for her decision. But everyone knew the truth. Karen McDictator had been dethroned not by force, but by a moat, some alligators, and the power of the internet. And as if to add insult to injury, I, emboldened by my victory and fueled by an endless supply of petty inspiration, decided to take things one step further. I commissioned the construction of a tiki bar. Not just any tiki bar, but a floating tiki bar, complete with thatched roof, colorful stools, and a bartender who specialized in tropical drinks. It was positioned in the middle of the moat, accessible only by a small, equally ridiculous rowboat. It was the ultimate act of defiance, a final, flamboyant middle finger to the HOA and their rules. They couldn't touch me. They couldn't find me. They couldn't even complain. I had outsmarted them, outmaneuvered them, and outpettied them at every turn. My moat, once a symbol of conflict, had become a symbol of freedom, a testament to the power of creative pettiness. From that day forward, no HOA rule was ever enforced against me again. The moat remained, a shimmering, alligator-infested oasis in the heart of suburbia. It became a legend, a story told and retold in the neighborhood, a reminder that even the most overbearing tyrants can be brought down by a well-placed moat and a healthy dose of humor. And I, the once bullied homeowner, became a local hero, the moat master, the one who dared to challenge the queen of suburban control and won. The whole experience, while initially frustrating, had been surprisingly fun. And as I sipped a tropical drink on my floating tiki bar, watching the alligators bask in the sun, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes a moat is just a moat, and sometimes it's so much more. Mike's excavation, Mike speaking. The voice was gruff, sounded like gravel rolling downhill. Yeah, hi Mike. Phil Thompson here. Need a quote on some fill dirt delivery. Sure thing, Phil. How many yards you need? What's it for? Filling a hole? Building up a berm? More like top dressing, I fudged. Whole backyard. Need about, say, 30 cubic yards? Mike whistled. 30 yards? For top dressing? That's a heck of a lot of dressing, pal. You sure? What kind of dirt you looking for? Whatever you've got that's cheap, I said. And, holds water really well, like really well. Got some drainage issues I'm trying to manage. Another pause. I could almost hear Mike scratching his head through the phone. Holds water, huh? Got some fill dirt with a high clay content. Cheap as dirt. But it turns to pure muck when it gets wet. You sure that's what you want? Perfect, I exclaimed, maybe a little too enthusiastically. 30 yards of your finest water-retentive clay-filled dirt, please, dumped right in the middle of the backyard. Ooh, right in the middle, Mike repeated slowly. Okay, buddy. Your yard, your muck. Delivery Thursday, okay? Thursday is perfect, Mike. My house. Standard suburban split level in Maple Creek, USA. Nice enough neighborhood, mostly quiet folks, except for the occasional garage band incident down the street. My yard. Nothing special, honestly. I try to keep the grass cut, pull the weeds most of the time. My big horticultural achievement was a small flower bed near the patio, where I'd managed to keep some petunias alive for 2 consecutive seasons. Not exactly the botanical gardens, but they added a nice splash of color. My pride and joy, in a low-key suburban dad kind of way. Then there was Brenda, next door. Middle-aged, perpetually frazzled-looking, owner of Fifi. Fifi was a dog. A medium-sized terrier mix, probably, with that boundless, chaotic energy only truly annoying dogs possess. And Fifi, according to Brenda, was an adventurous spirit with a love for exploring. Translation: Brenda opened her back door and let the dog run wild, treating the entire neighborhood as Fifi's personal chew toy and restroom, especially my yard. It started subtly. An occasional gift left near the property line. A suspicious-looking hole near the azaleas. I'd sigh, clean it up, maybe mention it politely to Brenda if I saw her. Oh, heavens, Phil, she'd gasp, hand fluttering to her chest. Was that Fifi? Naughty girl. She just gets so excited chasing squirrels she forgets where she is. Followed by zero change in behavior. But then it escalated. It became a daily occurrence. I'd come out in the morning to get the newspaper and nearly twist my ankle in a freshly dug Fifi hole right by the walkway. I'd be trying to enjoy a quiet cup of coffee on the patio, only to see Fifi gleefully excavating my aforementioned prize petunias, dirt flying everywhere. And the poop. Oh, the poop. Always in the most inconvenient places. Middle of the lawn just before mowing day, right next to the kids' sandbox. Once, memorably, directly on top of the welcome mat by my back door. It felt targeted. My conversations with Brenda grew less polite. Brenda, seriously, Fifi just pooped on my welcome mat. Oh dear, are you sure it was Fifi? There are other dogs around. There weren't. She must have had an upset tummy. Poor angel. Brenda, she dug up half my flower bed. Again. Well, Phil, maybe your soil is just particularly inviting. You should take it as a compliment. Compliment? Lady, the only compliment I wanted was for her to put her dog on a leash like a normal human being. I tried deterrents, sprinkled cayenne pepper around the flower beds. Fifi seemed to consider it a zesty seasoning. Bought one of those motion-activated sprinklers. Fifi either barked at it incessantly or treated it like a fun water game, emerging soaking wet, but undeterred. Brenda actually complained to me about the sprinkler hitting her precious angel. The nerve. I considered fencing, but our section of the neighborhood didn't have fences between backyards, just low decorative shrubs. Putting up something tall enough to stop Fifi would require HOA approval, and knowing my luck with Karen from my last neighborhood dispute, wait, different story, forget Karen. That process would likely involve sacrificing a goat to the Architectural Review Committee and still getting denied because the fence posts weren't the precise shade of approved taupe. I did try some of that low green wire garden fencing around the petunias. Fifi treated it like a minor inconvenience, pushing it over or digging under it within hours. I called animal control, twice, explained the situation, the constant trespassing, the digging, the deposits. They were sympathetic, but explained the local ordinance required them to witness the dog running at large, or for me to have documented proof of multiple instances within a short time frame. Honestly, sir, the officer sighed, these neighbor disputes over pets, they're tough. Best bet is usually working it out directly. Yeah, tried that. Failed miserably. Both times I called, by the time the animal control van cruised slowly down the street, Fifi was, of course, safely back inside Brenda's house, probably peering out the window with feigned innocence. Brenda likely even offered the officer lemonade. I complained to the HOA, filled out the forms, attached photographic evidence of Fifi caught mid-dig. They sent Brenda a generic form letter reminding residents of the county leash law and the importance of respecting shared community spaces. It had about as much impact as a strongly worded letter to a hurricane. My buddy Dave, who thankfully lives across town and only hears about my suburban woes over beers, was unsympathetic in a helpful way. Dude, you gotta escalate, he advised. Go full passive-aggressive. Get one of those ultrasonic dog repellent things. Or, I don't know, start flinging Fifi's poop back into her yard. Tempting as that last option was, I still clung to a shred of civilized behavior. But I was nearing the end of my rope. My lawn looked like a minefield. My petunias were history. My backyard, my supposed sanctuary, felt like occupied territory. Every time I saw that little furball dart across my grass, my blood pressure spiked. Something had to give. The breaking point, the moment my sanity finally packed its bags and left without forwarding address, came during my annual 4th of July barbecue. It wasn't a huge bash, just family, a few friends, Dave and his wife. Kids running around, burgers sizzling on the grill, cheesy patriotic music playing softly. A perfect slice of Americana. We were just sitting down to eat at the picnic tables I'd set up on the lawn. Plates loaded with potato salad, corn on the cob, juicy burgers hot off the grill. My brother-in-law was reaching for the ketchup when it happened. Fifi. Like a furry, four-legged, heat-seeking missile, she shot out from behind Brenda's bushes, made a beeline for the table, leaped up with surprising agility, snatched a burger clean off my nephew Timmy's plate, and bolted back towards her own yard, trailing ketchup and triumphant yaps. Timmy burst into tears. My sister glared at me like I was somehow responsible. Brenda, emerging moments later, called out, "Fifi, you naughty puppy, did you make a new friend?" before disappearing back inside. That was it. The sheer, unmitigated gall. Ruining my lawn daily was one thing. Terrorizing my petunias, okay, fine. But snatching a burger from the plate of a crying child at my own family barbecue? Oh, hell no. The gloves weren't just off, they'd been incinerated. That night, after everyone had gone home, the mood sufficiently dampened by the great burger heist, I sat on my patio, staring out at the dark lawn, the scene of so many Fifi-related crimes. Reason had failed. Diplomacy was a joke. Deterrents were useless. Animal control was toothless. The HOA was worthless. What was left? Revenge? No, too direct, too confrontational. I needed something. Passive-aggressive. Something that would solve the Fifi problem without requiring constant vigilance or direct conflict. Something that would make my yard the last place Fifi or even Brenda would ever want to set foot in again. My eyes drifted across the lawn, imagining Fifi digging another hole. Digging dirt. And then it hit me. An idea so simple, so primal, So gloriously messy, it made me grin in the darkness. Brenda always said Fifi just loved exploring, loved digging, loved being a dog. Fine. If Fifi loved dirt so much, I'd give her dirt. Nothing but dirt. Wet dirt. Mud, glorious, thick, shoe-sucking fur matting. Impossible to clean off the carpets. Mud. If my yard was an unusable swamp, Fifi couldn't dig holes. Where would she put the dirt? She couldn't leave neat little deposits. They'd just vanish into the ooze. And Brenda? Brenda would have to physically wade through muck to retrieve her precious, mud-caked angel if she ever let her wander over again. Maybe, just maybe, the sheer inconvenience and mess would finally convince her to keep her dog contained. The plan solidified quickly. Phase 1. Acquire dirt, lots of dirt. Not nice, expensive topsoil. Cheap fill dirt. The kind with lots of clay, the kind that turns into sticky goo when wet. Phase 2. Add water. Copious amounts of water. Turn the entire backyard, or at least the main lawn area Fifi favored, into a shallow, glorious mud pit. Phase 3. Observe. I hit the computer. Bulk fill dirt delivery near me. Cost of 30 cubic yards topsoil. Quickly revised to cheapest fill dirt. My backyard wasn't enormous. Maybe 1,500 square feet of actual lawn? 30 cubic yards sounded like enough to create a respectable layer of muck across most of it. Then water. My sprinkler system could probably do it, but it would take forever and might raise suspicion. Renting a water truck? Maybe overkill for phase 1. I decided multiple hoses running for a day or two should achieve the desired swamp-like consistency. Finally, the supplier. I needed someone who delivered bulk dirt and wouldn't ask too many questions. Found a local place online. Mike's Landscaping and Excavation. We haul it all. Sounded promising. I dialed the number. Mike's Excavation, Mike speaking. The voice was gruff. Sounded like gravel rolling downhill. Yeah, hi Mike. Phil Thompson here. Need a quote on some fill dirt delivery. Sure thing, Phil. How many yards you need? What's it for? Filling a hole? Building up a berm? More like top dressing, I fudged. Whole backyard. Need about, say, 30 cubic yards? Mike whistled. 30 yards? For top dressing? That's a heck of a lot of dressing, pal. You sure? What kind of dirt you looking for? Whatever you've got that's cheap, I said. And, holds water really well. Like, really well. Got some drainage issues I'm trying to manage. Another pause. I could almost hear Mike scratching his head through the phone. Holds water, huh? Got some fill dirt with a high clay content. Cheap as dirt. But it turns to pure muck when it gets wet. You sure that's what you want? Perfect, I exclaimed, maybe a little too enthusiastically. 30 yards of your finest water-retentive clay-filled dirt, please. Dumped right in the middle of the backyard. Right in the middle, Mike repeated slowly. Okay, buddy. Your yard, your muck. Delivery Thursday, okay? Thursday is perfect, Mike, I said, barely containing my glee. Operation Mudslide is officially a go. Thursday morning arrived, pregnant with possibility and the promise of large quantities of earth. I took the day off work, citing a vague home maintenance emergency. Around 9 a.m., the rumble began. A truly enormous dump truck, emblazoned with Mike's Landscaping and Excavation, backed slowly and carefully into my driveway, its bed tilted ominously high, filled to the brim with dark, clumpy-looking dirt. This, unsurprisingly, attracted attention. My neighbor on the other side, Mrs. Gable, poked her head out her front door, eyes wide. Kids down the street stopped their bike riding to stare. Even Henderson, different Henderson, Volcano Henderson, wait, no, forget the volcano, paused his meticulous lawn edging 3 doors down. And Karen? Her kitchen window curtain was pulled back just enough to reveal one suspicious, unblinking eye. The truck driver, a young guy chewing gum nonchalantly, hopped out, confirmed the address, glanced at my pristine, for now, backyard lawn, looked back at his truck full of dirt, and gave me a look that clearly said, "Are you out of your freaking mind?" "Just dump it right there in the middle?" he asked, gesturing towards the expanse of green grass. "Yep," I confirmed cheerfully. "Right in the center. Let her rip." With a deafening roar, a screech of hydraulics, and a ground-shaking thump, 30 cubic yards of clay-heavy fill dirt cascaded onto my lawn, forming an imposing brown mountain that instantly smothered about 2/3 of the grass. The truck pulled away, leaving me standing there with a shovel, surveying my newly acquired geological feature. "Phil," Mrs. Gable called out, venturing down her driveway. "Good heavens, what happened? Did a sinkhole open up?" "Nope." I leaned on my shovel, trying to look like this was all part of a master plan. "Just starting a major landscaping project, Gladys. Very natural. Getting back to basics." She just shook her head, muttered something about property values, and retreated indoors. Phase 1 complete. Now for Phase 2, hydration. I uncoiled multiple garden hoses, connecting them to every available outdoor spigot. Attached an array of sprinklers, oscillating, rotating, pulsating, and placed them strategically around the giant dirt pile and the remaining patches of doomed grass. Took a deep breath, turned all the spigots on full blast, and retreated to the patio to watch the chaos unfold. Water arced through the air, soaking the mound, streaming down its sides, pooling at the base. The dark clumps of dirt began to soften, dissolve, spread. The remaining grass quickly became saturated. I might have helped things along with a rake, spreading some of the dirt into thinner layers, ensuring maximum water absorption. I left the sprinklers running for hours, all morning, all afternoon. My water meter was probably spinning like a Formula One race car, but I didn't care. Slowly, inexorably, my backyard transformed. The grass vanished. The giant pile slumped and spread. What remained was a beautiful, uniform expanse of thick, brown, glistening mud. At least 6 inches deep in most places, deeper near the original pile. It wasn't just wet dirt. It was a genuine, top-quality mire, a swamp, a bog, my own private Passchendaele. It smelled earthy, primal. It looked appalling, and absolutely perfect. Around 4 p.m., I turned off the sprinklers, surveyed my handiwork. Glorious. Not a single blade of grass visible. Just smooth, deep, welcoming mud. Now all I needed was the guest of honor. Right on cue, around 4:30, Brenda's back door opened. "Fifi, outside," she called sweetly. Fifi trotted out, tail wagging, heading straight for her usual digging spot near my, now submerged, azaleas. She reached the edge of the lawn and stopped. Hesitated. Sniffed the air. Looked down at the strange brown wet expanse before her. I held my breath, watching from my kitchen window. What would she do? After a moment of canine contemplation, Fifi seemed to decide, what the heck? She took a tentative step into the mud. Her paw sank about 3 inches. She tried another step, sank again. She looked confused. Then, perhaps embracing her inner terrier, she decided digging was still the answer. She started frantically digging at the mud, sending brown splatters flying, getting deeper and deeper until she was practically swimming in the stuff. Then, apparently deciding this was the best thing ever, she started rolling in it, ecstatically, back and forth, coating every inch of her furry body in thick, brown goo. Brenda chose that moment to call her back. "Fifi! Fifi! Treat time!" Fifi, hearing the magic word, dislodged herself from the mire with a wet schluck and bounded happily towards Brenda's back door, leaving a trail of muddy paw prints across my patio. Collateral damage, acceptable. Brenda opened the door, treat in hand, smile on her face. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of utter horror as she took in the creature standing before her. Fifi, no longer white and fluffy, but a dripping, mud-caked swamp monster, wagging her tail enthusiastically, showering the doorstep with brown droplets. Brenda looked at her dog. Then her gaze lifted, slowly, towards my yard, towards the vast, glistening expanse of mud. Her eyes widened. Her face went pale, then flushed crimson. She opened her mouth and let out a scream. Not a startled yelp, but a full-throated, blood-curdling scream that probably rattled windows down the block. "Fifi! Oh my God, what happened to you?" she shrieked, recoiling from her own dog. Then her head snapped towards my house. "Michael Thompson!" she screamed, her voice cracking with rage. "What did you do? What did you do to my dog? What did you do to your yard?" I chose that moment to casually step out onto my patio, holding a lemonade, observing the scene with feigned detachment. "Problem, Brenda?" I asked mildly. "Problem?" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger first at the mud dog, then at my yard. "Look at her, look at this. This swamp. You did this deliberately, to hurt my Fifi." "Hurt her?" I raised an eyebrow. "Brenda, Fifi looks like she had the time of her life out there, rolling, digging, just being a dog, as you always say." I took a sip of lemonade. Seems my new natural earth landscaping is a big hit with the local fauna, though, I added thoughtfully, cleanup might be a bit of a chore for you. Maybe keep her on a leash next time? Just a suggestion. Brenda just stood there, sputtering, incoherent with rage, while Fifi tried to shake off a gallon of mud onto her owner's pristine welcome mat. Oh, this was going to be good. The immediate aftermath of Fifi's mud bath was intense. Brenda, after somehow wrangling her dripping dog inside, I heard muffled shrieks and sounds of frantic scrubbing for the next hour, apparently got straight on the phone. To everyone. The HOA was first, naturally. Within 24 hours, I had a certified letter. Immediate remediation required. Failure to maintain approved lawn cover. It cited bylaws about maintaining grass, prohibiting excessive soil displacement, creating unsightly conditions, and, my personal favorite, potential negative impact on neighborhood drainage patterns. They demanded I immediately remove the excess soil material, restore the approved grade, and install approved sod or seed within 7 days, or face daily fines that would make my mortgage payment look like pocket change. Then came the city. Brenda, not content with just the HOA, had clearly called every municipal department she could think of. First, code enforcement. A weary-looking inspector named Frank, no relation to the volcano guy, different story, showed up, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Thompson?" he sighed, looking out at my glorious mud pit. "Got a complaint about, this." "Just doing some major soil amendment, Frank," I said cheerfully, leaning on a shovel I kept handy for effect. "Preparing for a whole new landscape design, really aerating the substrate." Frank squinted at the mud. "Aerating? Sir, it looks like you hosted a monster truck rally in a monsoon. The complaint alleges you've changed the grade and might be causing drainage issues for your neighbors." "Drainage? Impossible!" I declared. "The water is being fully absorbed by this highly beneficial layer of nutrient-rich clay composite. Thank you, Mudslide Mike." Frank walked the perimeter, peered towards Brenda's yard, which was slightly downhill, made some notes. "Okay, look. Technically, large-scale landscaping can require grading permits if you significantly alter drainage, and the city does have ordinances requiring property owners to maintain basic ground cover to prevent erosion." He pointed at a spot where muddy water was slowly oozing towards the sidewalk. You need to contain this runoff immediately. Silt fence, berm, something, and you need to establish ground cover. Sod, seed, mulch, I don't care what, but mud isn't a permanent, acceptable ground cover. I'm issuing a notice to comply. You've got 15 days to show significant progress on erosion control and establishing cover. Great. Now the city was involved. But the real fun came a day later. Animal control. Again. This time, the officer looked even more tired than the last time, when Fifi was merely trespassing. Mr. Thompson, Officer Miller sighed. We're back. Received a complaint alleging your yard conditions are hazardous to animals. I blinked. Hazardous? It's dirt and water. And hazardous to what animals? The complainant's dog isn't allowed in my yard anymore. I haven't seen Fifi set paw over here since she took her mud bath. Yes, well, Officer Miller rubbed his forehead. The complainant, Miss Brenda Neighbor Lady? He didn't actually say that, but his tone implied it. Now alleges that the mud itself is a danger, that her dog could get stuck, ingest harmful bacteria, or suffer emotional distress from viewing the unsightly conditions. I stared at him. Emotional distress? From looking at mud? Is that even a thing? Officer Miller gave me a look that said, You have no idea the calls we get. He continued, Look, sir, as I told you before, unless the mud contains actual toxins, or you've dug pits designed to trap an animal, there's no violation regarding the condition of your private property relative to a neighbor's pet that isn't supposed to be there anyway. He glanced towards Brenda's house, where Fifi was visible in the window, looking clean and fluffy again. However, he added, we did remind Miss Neighbor Lady quite sternly about the county leash law and the penalties for dogs running at large. Perhaps that will have more effect this time. He tipped his hat and left, leaving me with a small sense of vindication. Life in the mud pit era was unique. Getting the mail involved, navigating a series of strategically placed planks I'd laid down. Mud got tracked everywhere, despite my best efforts. The backyard smelled perpetually damp and earthy. After a heavy rain, it briefly achieved the consistency of chocolate pudding. Buster the Beagle. Wait, wrong story. I don't have a dog named Buster here. Phil doesn't have a dog. Scratch that. I mostly avoided the backyard, except to occasionally turn on the sprinklers briefly to maintain the proper level of muck, especially if I saw Brenda peering out her window. Brenda, meanwhile, was now a model dog owner. Fifi was always on a leash for walks. Potty breaks happened in her own yard, which, I noted with satisfaction, was starting to show some wear and tear. When Fifi was outside, Brenda watched her like a hawk. Victory? It seemed so. But the cost was currently 30 cubic yards of mud, angry letters from the HOA, and a ticking clock from code enforcement. The HOA called an emergency meeting, of course. Failure to maintain property standards, creation of hazardous nuisance. I attended, armed with my code enforcement notice, showing I had 15 days to start remediation, not finish it, and a newfound sense of calm. Mrs. Davenport, different Davenport, chapel story, let's just call her the HOA president, was furious. Phil, this is unacceptable. It's blight. It's impacting everyone's property values. You must restore your lawn immediately. I am complying with the city's notice to comply, I stated calmly. I am currently preparing the soil and developing a long-term ground cover plan as required. These things take time. It's a mud pit, sputtered Henderson. Volcano story. Man, these neighbors blend together. Let's stick with Brenda's ally. Maybe Mr. Sterling from the fence story makes a comeback? It's disgusting. Actually, I countered, clay soil is excellent for water retention, reducing runoff in the long term once properly amended and planted. I'm thinking a native wildflower meadow eventually, Very eco-friendly. I might have made that up on the spot. They voted to fine me the maximum daily amount until the lawn was restored to approved standards, that is, grass. They threatened lawyers. I politely stated I was following city directives and would address the lawn situation in due course. It was a stalemate, but a muddy one. The great mud offensive couldn't last forever, as much as I enjoyed the quiet satisfaction every time I saw Brenda walking Fifi on a leash down the actual sidewalk. And the sheer absurdity of my backyard swamp, reality, and city ordinances eventually intruded. The code enforcement deadline was approaching, and the threat of city-imposed fines on top of the HOA's legally dubious ones was a powerful motivator. Plus, honestly, living next to a giant mud pit, even one born of righteous indignation, gets old. It smelled weird when it got really hot, and mosquitoes started eyeing it like prime real estate. So, Operation Remediation began. Slowly. Very, very slowly. First, I had to deal with the drainage and erosion control to satisfy the city inspector. This involved installing a silt fence along the property line bordering Brenda's yard. Oh, the irony. Building a fence to contain mud runoff caused by not wanting her dog past the original boundary. And digging a shallow swale near the back to manage water pooling after rain. This bought me some time with code enforcement Frank, who seemed relieved I was doing something, even if it wasn't installing sod immediately. Then, the mud itself. 30 cubic yards is a lot of dirt. Removing it would cost a fortune. So, amendment was the key. I started mixing in huge amounts of compost and sand, trying to break up the heavy clay structure. Rented a tiller and spent several back-breaking weekends churning the muck, trying to introduce air and organic matter. It was slow, messy work. My yard looked less like a swamp now, and more like, well, like a really badly plowed field that had hosted a mud wrestling tournament. Progress? All the while, I watched Brenda, watched Fifi. The leash stayed on. The random yard invasions ceased completely. Fifi, when walked past my property, would pointedly look the other way, as if remembering her involuntary spa treatment. Brenda avoided eye contact, offering only curt nods if we happened to be outside at the same time. The message, it seemed, had been received. The mud had served its purpose. Once I was reasonably sure Fifi's trespassing days were over, I accelerated the remediation. More compost, leveling rake. Finally, grass seed. Lots and lots of grass seed. And straw. And careful watering, using significantly less water than Operation Swamp Thing, thankfully. The HOA fines kept arriving during this process, but my lawyer buddy advised me to just document my ongoing remediation efforts and Fifi's newfound respect for property lines and hold off on paying. Let them take you to small claims court over aesthetic fines while you're actively fixing the issue they couldn't solve, he advised. Bad look for them. Slowly, painstakingly, green shoots started to appear. First patchy, then gradually filling in. By the end of the summer, my backyard wasn't exactly a pristine putting green, but it was recognizably a lawn again. A slightly lumpy, uneven lawn, maybe, but green. I removed the silt fence. I submitted photos to the HOA and the city showing the restored ground cover. The city closed their case. The HOA, after some grumbling and one last threatening letter about ensuring the grass species was HOA approved, finally stopped the fines, though they never officially rescinded the old ones. I filed them away. So, where are we now? My backyard looks okay. The lawn is still recovering in spots, a testament to its muddy past. My relationship with Brenda is best described as frosty silence. We coexist. We ignore each other. But crucially, Fifi stays in her own yard. Mission accomplished. Was it the most mature way to handle the situation? Absolutely not. Was it rational? Don't make me laugh. Did it cost me a small fortune in fill dirt, water, compost, grass seed, tiller rental, and Advil for my aching back? You betcha. But sitting here now, on my patio, looking out at my blessedly poop-free, hole-free, mostly lawn, and seeing Fifi trotting happily on a leash down the sidewalk across the street, there's a certain muddy satisfaction in knowing that sometimes, when all else fails, a truly epic amount of dirt and water can, in fact, solve your problems, or at least relocate them to someone else's bath mat. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I've earned a beer, and maybe I'll finally replant those petunias.